Mushrooms can regulate their own temperature. Some amazing discoveries are made by chance. So it was this time. During the tests of the new thermal imaging camera, the scientists noticed that the mushrooms are even several degrees Celsius cooler than their surroundings. Researchers have learned the mechanism that allows them to maintain lower temperatures and used them to build a refrigerator. Mushrooms are a large and diverse kingdom. Nearly 150,000 have been described by 2020. Their species, and yet it is believed that 90% fungi remains unknown. They are present all over the planet, in all climatic zones. On land and in water, both fresh and salty. Mushrooms range from tasty bolitas to tiny single-celled organisms. They were present on Earth almost 1 billion years ago. Or so say scientists who have found microscopic fossils identified as the remains of the oldest known fungus on Earth. Unlike animals and plants, thermoregulation among fungi is relatively little known. It has already been noted that mushrooms are cooler than their surroundings. In a new study, scientists confirmed these reports. They also observed that yeast and mold communities can also maintain lower temperatures than their surroundings. What's more, the researchers determined that the mushrooms cool through evaporation and used this mechanism to build a refrigerator. The description and results of the research were published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. History has shown time and time again that coincidence can make a mess in science. It was the same this time. Scientists received a new thermal imaging camera and went to the forest to check its operation. Fortunately, mushrooms were also included in the frame. This allowed the conclusion that for some reason their temperature is lower than that of their surroundings. So they decided to assemble a team of molecular biologists to take a closer look. It should be emphasized that, unlike animals or even plants, so far we knew little about the thermoregulatory mechanisms in fungi. It is also interesting that not only fungi, but also yeast and even mold are able to maintain a lower temperature than their surroundings. But what is the scale of this phenomenon? On average, the mushrooms maintained a temperature of about 2.9 degrees Celsius below the ambient temperature with an error margin of 1.4 degrees Celsius. However, there were mushroom species, such as the oyster mushroom, Pleurotus oco, in the case of which it was as much as 5.9 degrees Celsius C. Much more information about this unusual phenomenon was brought to scientists by research carried out in the laboratory, where they had control over both the temperature and the level of humidity in the air. It turned out that in fungi temperature control is carried out by evaporation, evapotranspiration. Mushrooms known to us from forests make this easier thanks to their structure. Under the cap there is a system of lamellae or tubes, which increases the evaporation surface. But yeast and mold also benefit from this mechanism. Interestingly, when we are dealing with a mushroom colony, it turns out that the closer to its center, the lower the temperature. Therefore, if mushrooms, and especially their colonies, are able to cool down, and mushrooms account for about 2% biomass found on Earth, their extraordinary properties can, for example, contribute to regulating the temperature in a given area. In this context, even specific trials have been carried out using the mushroom. It turned out that these fungi were able to contribute to lowering the temperature in a closed environment. The mushroom-based cooling system consisted of a styrofoam box and a small fan. And, of course, mushrooms in the amount of about 0.5 kilogram. This refrigerator was able to passively reduce the temperature of a semi-closed chamber by about 10 degrees Celsius in 25 minutes. The abilities of fungi may be of potential importance in the context of ongoing climate change. It is possible to try to determine how the fungi will adapt to them and whether they will be able to help plants and even animals in this. In the context of the issue of thermoregulation of mushrooms. So far it has not been possible to find an answer to one quite important question. Why do they cool down below the ambient temperature at all? Evapotranspiration itself was associated with, among others, creating an airflow that would allow the spores to disperse more easily. But it seems that we still don't know everything about this. Hugging a partner may reduce stress in women. Hugging a partner before stressful events may reduce cortisol levels in women, according to a new study. However, this simple method does not work for men. Scientists have found that hugging has a specific effect on women. It can reduce stress in various everyday situations. However, men do not get these benefits, which perhaps helps to explain men's reticence when it comes to cuddling a partner. New research published in the journal PLOS One found that women who embrace their partners before stressful events experience less stress than those who don't. The researchers tested this by measuring levels of the stress hormone, as it is often called cortisol. This effect was not observed in men. These findings support previous theories that showing affection, such as holding hands or hugging, can reduce signs of stress in women. The research was carried out by scientists from the Ruhr University in Bochum. They recruited 76 people who were in unions. Some of the experiments involved activities that may moderately increase stress. One of the tests was to hold your hand in a container of ice for 3 minutes while looking at the camera. Half of the people in the study were told to hug their partner before the ice test. Before and after the experiment, the level of cortisol in the participants' saliva was measured. The analysis showed that women who hugged their partner had lower cortisol levels than women who did not. However, no such association was observed in men. Other stress measurements, including changes in blood pressure and emotional state, also showed nothing. These results suggest that a brief cuddle with a loved one can improve stress response and reduce cortisol levels in women in stressful situations, such as exams, job interviews or presentations at work. The secretion of cortisol in response to a stressful stimulus is a necessary physiological reaction that helps us cope with difficult, threatening situations. But it is worth remembering that its release from the adrenal cortex triggers a whole cascade of subsequent biochemical reactions. As a result, he is also responsible for the body's immune response, an increase in blood pressure and for alleviating inflammation. This whole cascade can be dangerous to your health if triggered too often, such as when stress lasts too long. As a result, there may be, for example, increased appetite and weight gain. Experts acknowledge that more research is needed to better understand how hugging affects women. Researchers point out that we should also check whether hugging among friends can have similar effects.